Good day, everyone. It's an honor to be back here talking to you today on our kind of second installment of our webinar assessments. The last time we talked about formative, and today we're going to talk about summative assessment. The title here for today is Journeying Through the Continual Formative to Reach the Summative. Okay, going through that formative process, what we talked about last day, to get to those summative assessments. As we go through today, I want us to focus in on kind of four guiding questions for ourselves. And the first one being, can I be certain that my summative assessments are valid and true to the learner outcomes that we identified? Those learner outcomes, the criteria that we set at the very beginning for our students. We told the students what those learner outcomes were. Is my summative assessment valid to those? I didn't veer off anywhere. Number two, during this online home learning, what is the best form of summative assessment to give my students? Because it might look entirely different than the type of summative assessment that you have given in the classroom. Three, do I need to use the same summative assessment for each student? In our students, we have a variety of them checking in and out. They're not all in the same place. So do I have to use the same summative assessment? And number four, can we actually turn our summative assessments into those formative assessments that we talked about in the last webinar? Last time we talked about formative, and on the left-hand side there in the chart is the exact same chart that you saw last time. This time I added on the summative part of it so that you can see the comparison between the two. Summative assessments, they are graded. The real purpose for these summative assessments is for evaluation, to derive a grade and to allow learners to work intensively with the course material. And three, it's less focused on specific skills or information. Instead, we allow learners to demonstrate a wide range of skills and knowledge in the summative assessments. The other thing we have to remember with our summative assessments, also known as assessment of learning, please remember this is a snapshot in time. I mean, when we process through a task or a series of tasks, a unit, it could take a long time. But when we get to that summative part, maybe that summative part is only 30 minutes or 60 minutes in length or 90 minutes in length, whatever it happens to be. But regardless, it is just a snapshot in time of everything that they've been doing. Now, while these summative assessments prove themselves to be useful in reporting information, it often has little effect on learning. And that is straight from Alberta Ed.
So like Colin said, summative assessment is very much that snapshot in time, and it usually does not have a huge impact on further learning. It's that for now final declaration. Summative and formative aren't necessarily the opposite. They're certainly related, but I love this graphic because it shows definitely how formative builds towards summative. No surprise to anyone that, of course, I looked up the definition of summative and how it started, and I thought it was really neat because it's related to the word sub as in substance, substance being the essence of something. Not just all the parts added up, but the essence, that critical mastery of something. And then summative obviously is related to summit, which comes back to what Rick warmly says. It's that highest level of mastery or proficiency. As you can see here in this graphic, this learner has reached the summit right now. That doesn't mean there's not further learning, but it's that snapshot in time. So just like it is when we're in a regular classroom setting, many of us really grapple with the how of summative assessment, but many leaders in our field suggest that if we start by considering the why, the how can be determined more easily and the results will actually increase in validity. Thomas Guskey recently shared in a webinar that leading educators, researchers in education have asked thousands upon thousands of teachers why they summatively assess. We're going to take a look at their findings now and he'll walk you through them.
They find their responses of most educators can generally be classified into one of these six broad categories. One of the reasons we grade is we're trying to communicate information about student achievement to parents and families. A second reason, provide information to the students themselves, especially for the purpose of the self-evaluation. Third, we use grades to select and identify our group students into various educational programs. You have to have high grades to get into honors and advanced classes. You need decent grades just to be promoted from one grade level to the next. You clearly need high grades in a college university. And low grades are the first indication additional assessment may be necessary to determine a student has special needs. Number 4, we give grades because they provide incentives. Now, a lot of people debate this idea, but the evidence is pretty clear. What's the first thing students ask when a teacher announces there's going to be a quiz or assessment? Does it count? And if the teacher turned to them and said, no, it doesn't count, well, who studies for a test that doesn't count? And so clearly there's some incentive value. Number 5, we look at grades when we evaluate the effectiveness of various educational programs. We hope if the program is working well, grades will be going up. And then finally, to show evidence of appropriate effort or responsibility on the part of students. Now, we could argue that any of these are really legitimate purposes, but what I often do is ask educators just to look at these and rank order them from the most to the least important. And what always amazes me is we don't agree. That I always find some people are ranking one of these as the most important and others as the least important. We are all over the place. And see, that's the first problem that leaders in grading reform have to confront. Because when we don't agree on purpose, it's very difficult for us to deal with methods and procedures that align with that purpose when we don't agree.
What we've just watched is a snippet of a 2-hour webinar, and Dr. Gusky goes on to challenge all educators to think about those 6 reasons. And he affirms what we already know in Lakeland Catholic, that we would never summatively assess something like effort and go on to grade and report it. Just like Rick Wormley says, we're looking at that declaration of mastery or proficiency in relation to those key learner outcomes. So why are we looking at our why? Well, obviously because it steers our how. Sound assessment principles are going to apply whether we're in a regular classroom situation, whether we're in an online situation, and they're going to continue to apply when we go back to whatever our new normal is. However, the how of assessment obviously is going to change right now, the how of summative assessment. So here's some considerations to take a look at. In our extended home learning situation, we really need to build based on that guiding question, what's the evidence that's related to the essential outcome? More than ever, we're going to need to collaborate, whether that's with our grade or subject or department level. I also would encourage us to collaborate with people who teach nothing that's in our scope and sequence. Ask them, hey, if I asked you to complete this task, this group of tasks, this performance assessment, would it be clear to you that it's related to the essential outcomes, and get some feedback there? Talking with our staff about reallocation and renaming a final exam. If you use a performance assessment in June, it may look very different. It likely will look very different than what is considered a final exam. Knowing that our format of our summative is going to have to take on a very different look. What might that look like? How are we going to serve our students best? And seeing the assessment as a tool and not the end game. We've been talking about that final declaration of mastery, but we know obviously right now that we have no idea what the kids are going to be like that come back to us. They're not the same kids that left us in March. So more than ever, we're going to have to rely on each other to be sharing those assessments, those summative assessments, and using them as a tool, as a launch board to further learning. So considering the why, and then of course the how is going to help us to serve our students and increase the validity of our summative assessments.
And what are some of the essentials for our summative assessment? Please remember, at the beginning of our unit or the beginning of doing our tasks, one of the first things that we need to do is we need to identify those specific learner outcomes for our students, that criteria. Our students need to know, what is that target? It can't be a moving target for them. They need to know specifically that is what we are going towards. Those are the criteria that we set. Those are the learner outcomes. So in knowing that, we need to ensure that our summative assessments are reliable. We also need to ensure that they are valid, and we also need to ensure that they're free of bias. Now let's focus in on just that valid part there. You know, when we ask ourselves, you know, I look at my summative assessment, I have to ensure that that summative assessment hits those learner outcomes, that criteria. I didn't veer off anywhere. It is easy for myself as a teacher to go down a rabbit hole and assess students on something that I didn't even tell them at the beginning I would be assessing them on, right? There should be no surprises for our students. The other thing we need to remember is when we talk about assessment, we talk about it in the terms of a pyramid assessment. There's 3 parts to this assessment. One is the constant communication that we have with our students through that formative process. They're asking us questions, we're answering, we intervene with guiding questions, we help guide them, we tell them where they need to improve, we tell them what they're doing good at. That's that conversation. Second, students produce a product. They give us something. It could be an essay, it could be a short story, it could be a lab report, it could be a number of things, but there's a product there that we are looking at. And third is the observation. When we're in the classroom, we're forever observing our students. We're watching them. We're seeing how they are going after tasks. We can see when they're starting to struggle. We can see when they just totally shut down. Now, those are the 3 parts. Can I have 2 of the 3 and still assess, accurately? Perhaps. But what happens if 2 of those 3 are in struggle? And this platform that we are in right now with this home learning, we have to remember that our communication, even though some of you are doing Google Meets, it's not that constant communication that you have when you're in the classroom, right? Those one-off questions, or you just go over and then you intervene and you start questioning them, and you're throwing out those guiding questions for them. You're challenging them. Even when they accomplish something, you take it to the next level, right? That communication is not the same anymore. The other one that's definitely not the same is the observation part, right? We could do a Google Meet or a Zoom with them, and we can ask them, show us, demonstrate to us. But again, that's just a snapshot. When we're in the classroom, we are constantly observing. So those 2 out of the 3 parts of that pyramid, they're in struggle here with this platform. So we need to keep that in mind when it comes to a summative assessment. If that's the case, is there a place for this summative assessment, or should I just stay on that formative assessment route? The other thing is our students need to know what is the top level of performance. They need to know what is that standard of excellence, right? We don't just say, here's what it would look like to just get by. We need to show them. We need to identify to them what that top level is. Rick Wormley does a great job on talking about what mastery looks like. When it comes to these identified learner outcomes. He says anyone can repeat information, but it's the masterful student who can break content into component pieces. Not only that, they can take that and they can explain it to others, or they can even critique others in their demonstration of content and skills. They can analyze and say, here's where you could have done better. They have that ability. That's mastery. And finally, they can use it purposefully in new situations, transferring that knowledge. That's that conceptual understanding. That's mastery. That's where we want to get our students towards. We need to show them what it looks like.
You no doubt already have several ideas about how you're going to support your students in showing that snapshot in time, the essence of their learning to show their level of mastery. Let's just look at a few possible summative assessments. Again, we'll be moving into performance assessments 2 weeks from now, and we encourage you to use whatever you can to get the best out of our students. So first of all, asynchronous discussion activities, using those open-ended questions. But what I'd like to really note here is open-ended questions that apply to a unique context are going to increase the validity and help eliminate our students' temptation to plagiarize or just find an answer that's easily accessible to them. So the example here is we're asking students to rank rights and freedoms in order of importance to them as, for example, a 14-year-old living in Cold Lake. So a student is writing about freedom of movement and how it's actually important to them because they play hockey and have to go to different cities. So making it applicable to their context increases the validity there. Synchronous discussions. Most of us have been online with our students. We can be initiating discussions with a set of questions, working in small groups and asking students so we can check for understanding. We are the best judge of whether students are showing mastery or what level of success they are showing We need to give ourselves credits that we are able to assess through discussion. We could use multiple choice questions from an exam presented more short answer format. Oral assessments can be done through video conferencing, phone call, whatever's working for you. You know your kids and what they've got accessible to them. Many opportunities for written assignments, and many students have been giving us written assignments, paragraphs, essays, research. It's important, though, as it is with formative assessment, that we provide that scoring rubric in advance and exemplars so that we know what students know what they're shooting for. I would encourage you to check out the Language Learning Supports website. There are many different sentence frames in there that you could use that will help your students to communicate their ideas more clearly in writing. Performance of tasks, again, coming up, provides a way for students to demonstrate skills and process and competencies all together, so we get at that essence and not various little unconnected skills or bits of content knowledge. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there's many ways to address the how of summative assessment, but the principles of knowing why we're summatively assessing, aligning our tasks with the key learner outcomes, and ensuring that our students have ample chances and support to meet their summit will serve both them and us well.
So is there value in using summative assessments? Well, those guiding questions that we started with, you can see them there. And as you start to answer them, when you get to that part of, should I have a summative assessment for this unit? Should I have it for these tasks? And when you're in your collaborative or collaboration groups, when you are meeting as your huge PLC across the division, whether it's numeracy, literacy, whatever it happens to be, have that conversation. Ask each other, is there a place for a summative assessment here? You might find out as you start to answer these 4 guiding questions, you might say, yes, we can. There is a place for this. We can have a valid, reliable, unbiased summative assessment. Or you may realize in answering these questions, no, what we're doing right now doesn't lend itself nicely to a summative assessment. Or you might say, maybe, what could I do differently to make it that I could use a summative assessment? If you look at question number 4 there, can we turn our summative assessments into formative assessments? Let's look at that for a second here before we close out. I want you to think about a sport or a fine arts where you are judged on something, where you're given a score, similar to what we do in the classroom. We give a score or a ranking. So think of like a gymnastics or a dancing or whatever it happens to be, something that you're scored on. From competition to competition with the coach, that athlete is going through nonstop formative assessment. Formative, descriptive feedback after descriptive feedback. That coach is guiding them through the process, encouraging them, telling them, hey, this is what you're doing well, also giving them suggestions on what they can do to do better in a certain area. It is nonstop formative. Then the competition comes around. And as you know, if you've ever been to anything where there's a score, it could be a piano recital, it could be gymnastics, it could be anything like that. That is a snapshot in time. You've spent months in that formative department. Now you get to that competition. It could be as little as 60 seconds in time that you are performing or demonstrating something. Or it could be maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but it really is just a snapshot. And then you're given that score. Is that it? You just take it, that's your ranking, that's your placing, that's your score? No, you can take that and turn it around as to formative. Okay, I got 3rd. But what does that mean? Because I came to the competition thinking I'm bringing my best. I think I'm mastery, but I get 3rd. That's where you have the conversations with the judges, whoever else is giving those scores, or even your own coach saying, okay, where did I come up short? Like, why did I get 3rd? Why didn't I get that first? Why did I get 15th? Why did I not get 10th? Why didn't I get better than I did? So you're taking that summative and you're turning it around. You're giving yourself that information where you need to improve, where you need to work on. So yeah, you can definitely take a summative assessment and turn it around into formative for the athlete, but also for the coach. Because now the coach recognizes maybe the coach, kind of missed something and said, oh yeah, we didn't practice enough on that aspect. That's on me, the coach. So I need to focus in on that. Okay, so those assessments, remember, not just for students and parents, they're also for us as teachers. So Guide yourself through these 4 guiding questions. When you meet with your collaboration group, ask yourself, do we need a summative assessment? Is a summative assessment going to be valid, reliable, and unbiased if we do use it? I hope you find this useful, and thank you very much, and have yourself a most wonderful day.